And so let's talk about the AI Infrastructure Alliance. So what is it? Who's in it? And sort of what's the intention here? And how does it tie back to everything we just talked about?
Yeah, so the AI Infrastructure Alliance started as just a simple project, a simple bullet point where I thought I'm going to build an industrial alliance, and now it's taken over half of my life. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it's
Because you
you
needed
know
more things to
it's
do, right?
yeah, I needed more things to add to my resume. So I had to my time. But initially I thought, okay, well, this is an early adopter space. I want to raise awareness in the space. I want to get some articles in the news. I want to get people talking to each other. And so I kind of went to some early days. I put up a website. I went to the big companies in the space that I had contacts were shall remain nameless. And I said, look, I want to raise awareness, I want to do all this. And they go, great. When does the API standards committee meet? Like, where's the 86-page legal diagram? I said, hang on a second. I want to raise awareness. I want to. So they didn't quite get it. So I had to kind of take
Wait,
a
so
step
the
back for a while.
conflict was you sort of wanted to build community, and they were more like, let's have this more as a standards conversation.
Right, or they that's the way the large companies, which had already are fully developed, had already see it, but that the industry wasn't there yet. You're not
Right.
there to. We're not at a point
Too
where we can
early.
build this sort of universal API. We need to bootstrap our way there
Got it.
by getting all these vendors talking together. So
Right.
I started dialed back, and I started at Pachyderm where I work. I started working with Determined AI and Intelligent and some others, put them on the website. Then I started working very closely with the MLOps community, which is fantastic. A lot of data scientists, data engineers in Slack,
Mm-hmm.
having wonderful conversations, sharing information, learning from each other. And then it started to snowball from there. Now there's 62 members in there. And
Wow.
what's been amazing, it's been great. I mean, solutions integrators and people have had to hold back. And we just filed the paperwork to turn it into a 501c6. And it's moving to from an ad hoc organization to a membership dues organization. We hope to be one of the premier artificial intelligence organizations in the world. We're going to focus on education. We're going to focus on white papers and standards and bringing clarity to things. We're going to focus on events. And there's a whole bunch of things that we're really excited about our ability to do now. And we got to modernize the website. The website's still looking a little old, but it's look, I'm not ashamed of our beginnings and where we started. And what I've been excited about is the micro alliances that have started to happen. There's
Mm-hmm.
again 62 companies in there. A lot of those companies hadn't heard each other, weren't even talking to each other. And then all of a sudden you've got a dozen white papers that have come out of it, 3 or 4 go-to-market strategies, 5 or 6 engineering teams in different places cross-connecting, right? It's like, I think Algorithmia did papers with 6 people. Pachyderm has done, papers 2 or 3. And all of a sudden it starts maybe as a simple toy example where it's both sitting in your GitHub repo, and then it moves to something, much more comprehensive, right? I think, Pachyderm, for instance, and Seldon's teams have developed to a great relationship in terms of the sales team, engineering, and has been working strong on a go-to-market strategy. So, we really want to continue to foster everyone kind of working together and getting out of their little silos, right? And starting to think about how to solve these problems. You can't abstract out the kind of the eventual solution until teams start working together, solving problems, integrating, and figuring things out. So I'm excited about what we've been able to do so far. We've been able to get a lot of press out there. We've been able to become kind of a household name. And I'm excited about what the kind of next level of funding is going to be able to do for us and where we'll be able to go from there.
I think you or somebody in your crew called this the Rebel Alliance, or was that somebody else writing about
I
this?
called it.
Maybe did you use that phrase?
They quoted me and then put it in. Yeah, I think it was
Okay,
actually.
yeah. So this is like all the, or to use the other, what is it, David and Goliath. This is all the Davids, trying to say, hey, we're going to fight back against the Goliaths. Is that really what it is, or is that maybe a gross oversimplification and maybe not even
I
appropriate?
mean, look, simplifications are useful, right? It helps you understand things at a level. And the fact is, there are more kind of small and mid-sized startups in there, right? I think there's several $billions in funding within like across the groups that are in there at this
That's
point in
wild.
time, which is crazy, right? And there's some fantastic solutions integrators as well in there, and there's just even some hardware spaces in general purpose platforms, but. I think initially I thought it was kind of like us against kind of the big 3 clouds, right? In
Mm-hmm.
terms of, if I'm being honest about it, right?
Yeah.
But and kind of that end-to-end sort of thing that they're sort of kind of promoting. I think the cloud's an amazing innovation, and I think those tools are wonderful, and I think they actually have a great deal of purpose. But I just don't buy the fact that they're end to end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that they do everything, and they eventually they might once they've consumed 3 or 4 of the projects in the IO, it's fine.
Then they'll have
Right?
the depth, because right now they sort of
Right.
have the breadth in specific use cases with specific data,
Right.
but maybe after they acquire more and integrate more, they might have more depth and more use cases and more data types, etc.
Right, and think about like the way these projects develop. Right, you get 100 open source projects and 50 different proprietary solutions to solve a database problem before you converge on Postgres, MySQL, Oracle, and like
Right. The
then and now in the
handful.
modern day, right, and now in the modern day Snowflake and Redshift and
Sure.
these types of in MongoDB, right? So but there are lots of other people who didn't quite make it. So I mean, does anybody think that like the SageMaker feature store is going to be the final feature store that everybody in the world is using? I don't think so. Again, would Kubernetes have become the Kubernetes if it only ran on Google, or the fact that they open sourced it and pushed this wider community? So now the Kubernetes runs on even their rivals, right? It runs on Azure, and it runs on it runs on AWS, and it runs on prem and in enterprises and whatever else, and it's become this kind of general purpose factory.
Kubernetes was, just to take that tangent, I think Kubernetes was such a great strategic win and strategic shim, in the sense that they're like, hey, we're losing the cloud war, and this is being Google, we're third place and not really catching up, so let's just make this universal abstraction layer and make it run on absolutely every infrastructure, and once people are on top of that, then we can say, oh, so look, it's so easy to come over and move your stuff onto our infrastructure. Genius long-term move, I thought.
Genius long-term move, and by the way, they played to their strengths, right? They
Yeah.
had Omega and Borg, which they've been working on, like internet level scale, like managing hundreds of data centers level scale, and they've been pushing containers. They created containers long before Docker. They were pushing 2 billion containers a day, right? So they had already come up with a lot of these design patterns with Omega and Borg, and they worked through those. By the way, Omega and Borg still running inside of their house in addition to Kubernetes. Those were evolutions of how they solved this problem. Remember, we were talking about evolution over time, and you don't know what you don't know. And then after you've solved a problem, you go, geez, if I could go back to the drawing board, maybe I would have solved these things in a totally different way. But you've got technical debt. So then you create a new system. And then you go, well, if 5 years later, you go, maybe if I'd had this foreknowledge, I could have gone back, and all of a sudden you get Kubernetes. So
Right.
the same kind of thing now is that you've got a lot of these systems that are going to develop. It's way too early to say you've come up with the complete final system,
Yeah.
when half of the protocols and like design patterns haven't even developed in the space. Are still early phases, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So the I is really about helping foster that canonical stack, foster that interoperability, foster like a competitive bazaar. The way I think about it, and this came out of my Red Hat days, right? The cathedral versus the bazaar kind of
Sure.
thinking, where you have these kind of top-down military-style organizations that existed forever. Like the founder tells everyone to do, everyone shakes in their boots, and nobody wants to report up to the founder that that's a dumb idea. So you better hope your founder's really smart. Versus the bazaar effect, where like it's a lot messier, it's more organic, it takes a long time to develop. You look at a lot of open source software, the interface is hideous at first, it's this weird design by committee, and then all of a sudden it starts to come together and blows past kind of the proprietary version.
It's the Solaris versus Linux story again.
Exactly right. Originally, Solaris was infinitely better. I mean, still things like ZFS blow away kind of Btrfs and the other copy and write file systems that have come after it. There's still things that it does better. But when you talk about a system that runs on any kind of hardware, that can be run on a tiny piece of hardware, to something that powers the stock exchange and rockets to Mars, Linux has it beat hands down, right? Because of that kind of messy development cycle.
Right.
So it's not just open source, that's development, that's the evolution of these kinds of things over time, right? And that's really where we have to get to in this space, is that there's going to be more of this evolution, and anyone who thinks that they kind of got the end all be all solution now, it just hasn't developed far enough along. You can't possibly have anything you're not going to throw out in 6 months, right? Even if they're swapping it out secretly on the back end.